Jung had this idea that people's shadows reach all the way down to hell, which is actually a very frightening concept. And what he meant by that is that if you take a look at the impulses that drive you that are actually malevolent, if you can admit to such impulses, that if you basically follow those all the way down to their origin, you find some very nasty things. And what you find down there basically is what allies you with people who've done terrible things. And that's not a very pleasant experience, I would say, although one thing that's worth thinking about is that it is something that can protect you against being very, very badly hurt. Because one of the things that characterizes people who develop post-traumatic stress disorder is that they're often naive. And then they encounter something that's really not within their framework of thinking, and it's usually something bad. And because there isn't anything in their philosophy, their way of looking at the world that has prepared them for that, they end up fragmented and devastated. And so it's actually protective to you if you can figure out what your full range of capabilities is, because that can help you understand other people a lot better and to be wiser and more careful in your actions. It's also useful, I think, if you want to convince yourself to act properly, because if you regard yourself as harmless, which is a big mistake, then nothing you can do is really that bad, right? Because you're harmless after all. But if you understand that you're seriously not harmless, then that can make you a lot more careful with yourself. And I would say that's especially true maybe when you have kids and you start dealing with your kids. If you know that what you're capable of because you're human, then that can motivate you to be much more careful with what you say and do.
Well, I think with any, let's call it addictive process, I mean, email is powerfully addictive, right? Partly, it's a slot machine, and I mean that technically. So when you pull, that's a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, if I remember correctly. And it's very addictive because if you pull on the slot machine arm enough, you will win. And you never know which pull will reward you. And so not only is that addictive, it's very hard to extinguish that. And so emails like that, because there's always something beckoning, and now and then it's a jackpot. And social media is like that because, people are posting interesting things. And so, well, how do you overcome an addictive process? And partly, you do it by replacing it with something better, right? So, when people study drug and alcohol use, they often make an elementary mistake, which is to try to figure out why people use drugs and alcohol. That's not a smart thing to wonder. We know why people use cocaine. Cocaine directly stimulates the systems that produce positive emotion. But often what people have to do to get themselves out of an addictive process is to find something better to do to replace it. And so I would say the problem with the gadgets, and I mean, they're amazing things, is that they proximately interfere with medium to long-term goals, I would say. And so I think the first thing you have to do to bring them under control is figure out what it is that their use is interfering with. It has to be something important. So you think, well, I want to do something important. Well, what is that? Oh, it could be personal. Maybe you want to have a relationship. You want to get married. You want to have kids. You want to have a career that's meaningful. You want to have a life. You want to have an Abrahamic adventure and be the father of nations, let's say. Well, you can't be ratting away on your cell phone and doing that. And so I think part of it is to set your sights high and make a plan and figure out who you could be and see if obsessive utilization of smartphone fits into that vision of nobility.